Okay, this is Chapter 7, Cost, Value, and Profit, and I'm going to go over some of the basic assumptions in the chapter. So if if you come back through it and you're a little bit lost, start back at the beginning so that you just understand what's going on, okay? And the notes are really helpful. So in the first place, cost, value, and profit helps managers set prices, try to figure out what to do with new products or services, like how much do we have to sell it for? What does our cost have to be? It can assess whether or not a given product should be made, or maybe we should just outsource it and buy it someplace else. Whether we should replace equipment or maybe fix it. And finally, to perform what-if analysis to make better decisions, like what if we did this and what if we did that. And the basic cost, value, and profit model is that I think of it in the other way. Well, profit is equal to revenue less variable costs, less fixed cost. Okay? And what's nice about variable costs is that if they're a percentage of the selling price, those percentages always stay the same. So this really lends itself to analysis well. And revenues can be estimated as your selling price times the units sold. Variable cost is your variable cost per unit times units sold. And fixed costs are the same in the relevant range. And the only other thing that is probably a little bit important to know something about are the assumptions in cost, value, and profit. And this first one is the first assumption that only changing volume affects the cost. Okay? Because we can't really handle too many changes in basic assumptions. So we're just assume that this is underneath it all, and those are limiting factors. Okay? That managers can classify every cost as either variable or fixed. Okay, some are mixed, but we can take them apart, and no fixed is purely fixed and no variable is purely variable. So we just kind of categorize them. Revenues and costs are linear in the relevant range. We're familiar with that from everything with the estimating cost. And inventory levels don't change, and the sales mix of products doesn't change. That's probably the trickiest one right here. So that if we're selling 3 products, we're assuming a fixed like market basket, okay? And that's how we figure it out, our contribution margin. So the unit contribution margin income statement, if we divide that by the number of units, it'll helps determine our selling price and our cost per unit. Okay, this is what it's good for. So in units, we can take our sales revenue, per unit. Sales revenue less variable cost is contribution margin. And then you can take off fixed cost per unit if you want, but I wouldn't. I would just leave this only in the total cost column, and that would give you, quote, net income per unit. So a few important things here. These are the words and the concepts that are throughout the chapter. And the first one is the contribution margin ratio. And the CM ratio is the contribution margin, right here, divided by sales. Okay, that's the CM ratio. And then if we have that number, then we can predict sales in dollars rather than just sales in units. Okay? And one of the things that we always want to know, especially if we're planning a new product, is what break-even is. And it's the point at which the company has covered all their fixed costs, okay, and has 0 net income. So we've got a whole bunch of problems that we'll do on this. That is break-even. So at this point, the contribution margin is equal to your fixed cost, okay, because net income is 0. All right? Sales mix is the amount of each product sold and how each product affects the overall profitability of the company. And what we calculate here is a weighted average contribution margin per unit. And then the margin of safety is the excess of expected sales over break-even sales. That's all it is. So we look at what our sales are right now, and you see what break-even is, and you figure out, well, I could lose, $4,000 in sales before I might not break even. Okay, so it's the margin of safety. And something like this might have been helpful during COVID. Okay, and the last one is operating leverage, and leverage sort of translates into risk. And it's the amount of fixed versus variable costs that a company has. If you've got more fixed cost, okay, then you've got higher operating leverage, and it makes the company more risky. excuse me, in some ways you can gain more income, but you can also lose more income faster too. Okay? So high leverage means higher fixed costs and high contribution margin ratios, whereas low operating leverage means more variable costs and less fixed costs. Okay, so these companies are less risky or less susceptible to losses if there's a drop in sales. Okay, and the operating leverage factor is the contribution margin divided by operating income. Now, once we work with problems, this will all become clearer. Okay, and here are some examples. Here's a $50. I don't want to go on too long here. It's just supposed to be an introduction, but this is assume a $50 selling price per unit. We got fixed costs of 1,000 and variable costs of 30 per unit. How many units must be sold to break even? Okay, this is our first break even formula, and that is the fixed costs plus net income, okay, or a target income, divided by your contribution margin per unit gives you break even units. Okay, so fixed costs divided by the CM per unit. So here our fixed costs are 0. We have no target income. Our contribution margin per unit is a selling price of 50 minus 30. So that's 20. So that's 50 units to break even. Okay. So now we're making the same assumptions, only we're assuming that 200 units were sold. Okay, so if 200 units were sold, 200 units would equal, what are we looking for here? Oh, what is the income if 200 units are sold? So instead of break-even units, we can set this equal to our 200 units. So that would be 1,000 of fixed cost plus target income divided by our contribution margin of 20, okay, which would give us $3,000. So that's what our income would be if 200 units were sold, and you could prove that too if you wanted to. Okay, now let's say that we've got a same facts, only we've got a desired as a number 1, but we've got a desired net income of 300. So 1,000 plus 300, 1,300 divided by 20, that tells us that we would break even at 65 units. Okay, and then the last one that's here, I'm not going to do sales mix now. The last one that's here is what are the total sales dollars for desired net income of 300? So what are we going to have? Same as in 3. So we've got 65 units, and a selling price of 50 gives us a sales dollars of $32.50. But the other way to do it is to take net income, or fixed cost plus your target net income, divided by your contribution margin ratio. And this is the formula you're going to have to know. Okay? So don't think, oh, I'll always do it this way, because you may not have the data. And the question will box you into using fixed cost plus net income divided by your contribution margin ratio. So make sure that you can do this. Okay? And then there are a couple other things. There's sales mix here and margin of safety, and then there's some practice problems. But I'll just tell you what the concept is behind sales mix. Here we've got, let's say that you sell Girl Scout cookies and you sell Thin Mints and Tagalongs, and for every 4 boxes of Thin Mints you sell 1 box of Tagalongs. Okay, so for a total of 5 boxes. So my sales mix is 4/5 are Thin Mints and 1/5 are Tagalongs. Okay, so that's like 80% and 20%. This would have to add up to 100%. I'm going to multiply that times my contribution margin. Here's my selling price less variable cost. Multiply that 80% times our contribution margin, and I get the weighted average contribution margin. $1.60 for Thin Mints and 60 cents for Tagalongs. So for every bundle like this, I'm making $2.20. Okay, so then I can take my my break-even formula, and I can say we want to know how many units are required to break even. I can take fixed costs plus no target divided by the 220, our weighted average contribution margin, and that gives us 500 total. So that would mean 80% of those will be Thin Mints, or 400 boxes, and 20% of the 500 will be 100 boxes of Tagalongs. Okay. All right. Well, that will just get you started, or like a quick review about what this is about. And I want to go over these problems too. These are really good problems to work with. So maybe we'll do these probably on the last day. I've got nice introductory problems for the first for class. Okay.